Richard's bio, I didn't think I would need to read it because I didn't think there was anyone in this room that didn't know who this incredible man is. But as I read through it, there were a few facts that I thought were truly unbelievable. First, there are now more than 100 Virgin companies worldwide employing approximately 60,000 people, which means he's in charge of the livelihood of 60,000 families around the world. I found that incredible. Number two, he's about to start commercial space travel this year? Yeah. We're going up. He's the United Kingdom's #1 Twitter user, and he's the world's most followed person on LinkedIn. But what I thought was absolutely incredible is that in 2004, he established his nonprofit Virgin Unite to tackle both social and environmental problems and strives to make business a force for good. Most of his time now is spent working with Virgin Unite, his nonprofit. So, yeah. Richard, so 5 years ago, I read a blog on Virgin.com which completely blew my mind. You wrote and sent it out wide that talking about how you hired former offenders and what great work they did for your company and how hard they worked, and you encouraged other CEOs to hire former offenders. And then throughout the years, I saw you really dive deeply into the discussion around the drug war. And every time I told somebody that you were coming to speak today, the first thing everyone asked is, why does he care? And I'd really like to know why Richard Branson cares about this issue.
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert at all in this issue. I've come here to listen, to learn, and hopefully from learning to try to do more. I think so many of us mess up in our lives. I was lucky I messed up when I was 19 years old. I thought I could get away with not paying some tax. It's not a good idea. And ended up a night in prison. I was fortunate. My parents had a house. They were willing to mortgage the house. I didn't have to spend longer in prison. And I think that's a system that's flawed. Why should people while they're waiting on bail who can't afford it go to prison, and people who can afford it not go to prison? But that's another subject. That moment just being in prison, made me, first of all, realize I didn't like the idea of going to prison. So from then on, I think I've managed to, make sure I make decisions where I can sleep well at night and avoid that. But I've also just learned that if you give people a second chance in life, and I had a second chance, I wouldn't have been employing 60,000 people, I suspect, if I'd spent 2 or 3 months in prison. If you give people a second chance, they can do great things. And I think if you can give people the dignity of work when they leave prison, if you don't just dump them on the street and tell them to make their own way to the nearest city, if you can give them a chance to stand on their own 2 feet, make people realize that they're loved and that they're cared for. And I thought what the lady said earlier about looking forward, not looking back, is fantastic. So I think as many companies as possible, need to get out there and take people on and give them a chance. And I think they'll be surprised how successful it is.
Thank you. So some might say employing someone coming out of prison is a risk. Some might argue it isn't. I read you sold Virgin Records, which was your core business, and leaped into the airline business, which was not your core business, and that was a risk. We have a couple hundred inmates sitting in the crowd today that took some stupid risks and have made some good decisions. What advice would you give them in terms of what risks are worth taking and what risks aren't?
Well, I mean, look, I've met, maybe 50 or 100, fairly superficially when I came in, and it's fantastic that I think pretty well everybody in this room is studying, because A, I think it'll make their time in prison a lot more interesting to study, and B, it's going to give them that much better a chance of getting a good job when they get out. It may even, turn them into an entrepreneur. I mean, basically, an entrepreneur is somebody who comes up with an idea that can improve other people's lives and make their lives better. That's all a business is. And I think, you people have got time here to think about, when they get out, what could, do they have a hobby? What could they do to make other people's lives better? And so, possibly rather than going and working for somebody else, people here could actually start a business when they leave, and start in a small way. I mean, I started literally in a really small way, like handing out leaflets outside concert halls and selling music, getting the money in from the leaflets and then sending the music out, and just one thing led on to another. So. You don't have to dream big straight away. Just try to get the nuts and bolts of your business going.
Great. Sitting in this room today, we have a lot of the decision makers in the governor's office and the Department of Corrections who are really guiding this system. And working with them, I know that they really believe strongly in turning people's lives around. But there's obstacles, political obstacles, a recidivism rate around 60%, 74%. If you're 18 to 25, if you're spending billions of dollars and failing 7 out of 10 times, I'm sure you would shut that company down really quickly. As a businessman and a concerned human being, what advice would you give to lawmakers and decision makers about how to run this differently?
Well, I've spent the last 3 years on something called the Global Drug Commission. The Global Drug Commission was set up by President Cardozo of Brazil. It has 14 other presidents on the commission. It has Kofi Annan, who used to be Secretary of State, and it has myself as a business leader. And we spent 2 years looking at the war on drugs. And by the way, the reason I'm going straight to drugs is that so many people in American prisons started because of some element of the drug problems, and what we've found is that in particular in America, the war on drugs has failed. It's failed in particular the poorer communities in America, and that there are alternatives, and yet America seems to continue locking people up, having the most people in prison more people in prison in America than in China, which has got a much bigger population and is much more you would have thought would be much more draconian. So as a businessman, what we did was we went and looked at other countries, and we looked at to see whether anybody else was doing it better. Portugal had a major drug problem, and 12 years ago, a very forward-thinking president said, we've got it all wrong. If somebody has a drink problem, we help them. If somebody smokes too many cigarettes, we do our best to try to help them stop smoking too many cigarettes. What's the difference between that and other drugs? So they said, okay, we're not going to lock anybody up ever again for taking any kind of drugs. What we're going to do is help them. So learning from that, the National Drug Commission are urging countries all over the world to treat drugs as a health problem, not a criminal problem. There's somewhere like Russia that draconian treatment of people on drugs. They've got the biggest HIV problem in the world, so if you give people clean needles, you can make sure they don't contract HIV. There are just so many benefits, I think, of taking that approach.
Thanks. So now I really want to open it up to you guys, specifically the inmates in the audience. Let's now open it up for anyone that wants to ask Sir Richard Branson a question.
I'll tell you what, the first prisoner to ask, when they get out, they can get a free ticket to London.
Boom, right there.
All right, we got him here.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Mr. Richard. Thank you for coming. My question is, what inspired you or gave you the heart to hire an ex-convict?
I think we were talking about this earlier, and I think what's surprising is just that not more people are doing it. You know, the people in this room could be my children, they could be myself, they could be my brothers, my sisters, and when somebody slips up in life, and I suspect quite a few people in here didn't slip up and are in here incorrectly anyway, but when somebody slips up, they should be given a chance, and it's not only the right thing to do, but I think it's the right thing for society as well. And instead, you know, in America, when people come out of prison, you know, they're continued to be punished. You know, they can't get food stamps, or you know, I think getting mortgages and other things are difficult, which puts people on a path to reoffending again. So and it works. You know, I mean, some of our best best employees at Virgin are people who've been in prison, including myself.